Hello, once again, and welcome to Political Dharma with Alan Zundel, the show that deals with politics beyond the two party system, specifically movements and organizations related to independent voters and alternative political parties. Last week, I said I was dividing my weekly updates into two types of subjects, one having to do with independents and alternative parties in general, the other having to do specifically with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Nicole Shanahan, his former vice presidential running mate for his independent run for the presidency last year during the election. I covered his independent candidacy quite extensively during the presidential campaign season, and a lot of people who followed me at that time are still interested in how Kennedy is doing now that he's in the Trump administration but as the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as interested in his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, I should say former running mate, who has hinted that she may consider a run for the governorship of California as an independent next year in 2026. So this week I have some news about both of them, mostly about Kennedy and his capacity as head of the Health and Human Services Department. And then Nicole Shanahan had a couple of interesting posts on her X account, one having to do with geoengineering and her concerns about that, and another having to do with a relatively recent religious conversion. And both of those have been making some news. So I wanted to discuss those with you. Let's start off with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his role in the Health and Human Services Administration. Well, last week, I reported that there was a postponement of a vaccine advisory committee by the Trump administration. And I think Kennedy specifically was mentioned in that order. This was the Center for Disease Control and Prevention Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and they had on their agenda specifically that they're going to talk about a new proposed meningitis vaccine. And I said at the time last week in my report that I saw this made some sense because he inherited these advisory committees from the Biden administration. And of course, he wants to double check that their advisors were chosen for the right reasons, that they don't have some hidden ties to the pharmaceutical industry or anything of that nature, just doing due diligence, I think. So they postponed that for 90 days. And I could see some sense behind that as long as they are bringing in people to vet these people that actually have some credibility. And I'm at this point still giving him the benefit of the doubt on this and his care and caution about vaccines. Well, this week there was another advisory committee that was also canceled. Let me bring that one up. This is an article from the Washington Post that says meeting of FDA vaccine advisors canceled. Well, it wasn't really canceled. It was also postponed. The FDA is the Food and Drug Administration that is also, just like the Center for Disease Control, is also under the authority of the chair of the Department of Health and Human Services, which is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It says here that Trump administration officials, now it didn't specify Kennedy, but he would presumably have a role in this, have canceled a federal vaccine advisory committee meeting expected to be held next month that was intended to help select the makeup of next winter's influenza vaccine. This is the second panel that has been postponed or canceled since Kennedy has sworn in as Health and Human Services. They throw in that phrase, a longtime anti-vaccine activist. And down there a little bit, this part worried me a bit. Fourth paragraph down, the email that was announcing this to the advisory committee, the email warned members against forwarding it and suggested members decline to answer questions for the media. Well, someone leaked this to the Washington Post, and I think it's clear that they are concerned about this generalized distrust of vaccine advisors. Now, since this is the second one, okay, I'm still willing to give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt, but the idea of putting in that email, if he had anything to do with oversight over the composition of that email, saying that it did not want this to get to the press, that not to talk to the press and not to make the email known to other people, don't forward it. That goes against his pledge of transparency in how he ran the administration and the decisions he makes vis-a-vis these kinds of situations dealing with health and vaccines and the rest. So there, it's a little bit eroding my willingness to give him the benefit of the doubt. And the benefit of the doubt has to do with his repeated statements that he is not anti-vaccine. He has concerns about the influence of the pharmaceutical company, that testing is not done adequately, that the vaccine schedule for children has too many vaccines too early and may be having harmful effects that haven't been adequately studied. So in those situations, I say, okay, there is reason to be cautious about these things. And there are reasons to think that, maybe he does have some willingness to have vaccine. He said he and his children are vaccinated. So some vaccines must be okay, but other newer ones, maybe he's being more cautious about. This is yet another one. This comes from Fox News. Multi-million-dollar Biden-era COVID-19 vax project halted by Trump's HHS. Now, this is not canceled. It was postponed. This has to do with a 90-day stop work order issued on Friday, not yesterday, we got a week ago Friday, on a contract with the Health and Human Services with an American biotech company, VaxArt Incorporated, for them to develop a new oral COVID-19 vaccine. They were to start clinical trials on Monday, that is last Monday, and they wanted to, the HHS wanted to study initial findings before resuming the contract. So about $240 million have not yet been paid and are on hold until they do this review. And they criticized the Biden administration's oversight, saying they want to ensure safe, effective, and, quote, fiscal-minded, end quote, vaccine technology. And that article is by Emma Colton of Fox News. Now, with COVID-19, I see even more reason to be cautious because these were rushed to the market without adequate testing, in my opinion, during the coronavirus pandemic. Two sides to that argument. Everybody knows it's become very polarizing, what you think about the vaccine and how much harm it did. I have had in my family some personal experience with the vaccine having side effects that were very worrisome. And who knows what would have happened without the vaccine? Would things have been better? Would things have been worse? This is, to me, something I can't sort out. I don't have the expertise. But because COVID vaccines recently are something using a new technology, I think there are reasons to be cautious, especially as we are not currently facing a COVID crisis. On the other hand, we are facing an escalating crisis in measles across the country. Very few cases so far, but enough that are spreading fast to be worried about this. So they asked, a reporter asked Donald Trump in the first cabinet meeting that he held last week. Let me put that more clearly. Trump held his first cabinet meeting of his administration last week, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was there. And when Donald Trump was asked a question about this measles outbreak that happened in multiple states across the United States, this is what he did. He deferred the question to Kennedy, and here's what Kennedy had to say.
There's a measles outbreak in Texas at the moment in which a child is reported to have died. Do you have concerns about that, and have you asked Secretary Kennedy to look into that?
Well, why don't we, Bobby, do you want to speak on that?
Well, we are following the measles epidemic every day. I think there's 124 people who have contracted measles at this point in Gaines County, Texas. Mainly, we're told in the Mennonite community, there are 2 people who have died, but we're watching it, and there are about 20 people hospitalized, mainly for quarantine. We're watching it. We put out a post on it yesterday, and we're going to continue to follow it. Incidentally, there have been 4 measles outbreaks this year. In this country last year, there were 16. So it's not unusual. We have measles outbreaks every year.
Several commentators have pointed out errors in what Kennedy had to say. For one thing, there hasn't been 2 people who died, but just 1 child. He said that about 20 were hospitalized mostly as quarantine or for quarantine purposes, and no, they are sick according to doctors and hospitals. They're acutely sick with respiratory problems from measles. He also said there are 4 outbreaks so far this year and 16 last year, so it's not unusual, but others are saying that it is unusual to have this many cases spreading this fast, this early in the year. So compared to other years, it does look worse. Now, my concern here is mostly that measles vaccine has been around a long time. I had measles as a child before they started giving vaccinations, so I should have some immunity just from having had it. I was lucky. A lot of children have died from measles or become blind or in other ways severely compromised in their health. So measles is very highly transmissible, very serious illness, and hits children. If we're caring about children, this is something we should be concerned about. And I was kind of disappointed Kennedy didn't say anything like, measles vaccines are known to be safe, so you should take preventative measures here to make sure your child is immunized. That would be in line with this nuanced view that, maybe some vaccines are good, but newer ones that haven't been tested adequately. I don't think the drug industry had a lot of influence over the development of measles vaccine way back when. Maybe I'm wrong. I know Kennedy, at least I've heard that Kennedy has written a whole book about measles and vaccinations, which I have not read. In general, he seems to do a lot of research on the subjects he writes about. I don't know what's in it, but this is the trend here is concerning me, that anything having to do with vaccines seems to be along the lines of more skeptical towards vaccines rather than any acknowledgement that maybe there is some use for vaccines. Some vaccines are safe, and that's not liking the direction this is going. I hope to be reassured as time goes forward that there is more concern about the problems that we can have if people are not vaccinated, because if he's not really anti-vax, I'm not anti-vax, he should be occasionally making noise in that direction and not just on the other side of the issue. All right, so much my editorializing about this. There is one more Kennedy story I have, which is relevant to his past presidential run, and this is that the United States Supreme Court has refused to consider his appeal to them on this New York ballot access case. Some of you may remember that when he applied to be on the ballot as a presidential candidate in the state of New York, he used his residence that he has often used in New York as a place that he was renting there. But some people brought a complaint, and it was backed by people associated with the Democratic Party, said that the residence he listed in New York, he hasn't lived at, and it's not his real residence. His residence in California, so he falsified his paperwork to get his name on the ballot as presidential candidate. Well, if you had put California down, there would have been other problems, and he says there are a lot of reasons for him to use New York that fit New York criteria, but his appeal to the Supreme Court from the state courts that he was properly knocked off the ballot in New York. The appeal to the Supreme Court was that this is unconstitutional addition of a qualification for the presidency that's not in the Constitution. And I guess he has a point there, but that is now moot because the Supreme Court has decided and the presidential election is over, and there's no way to revive this, and we'll see. Cases like this don't come up too often where somebody's challenged based on residency requirements when they're running for president. So I don't know how much reach it has, but it is a follow-on to things that I talked about here. All right, so let's move on to Nicole Shanahan and some of the interesting things that she has been posting on her X account. We'll go over to, first of all, a video that she posted having to do, she was on a beach last Sunday. She posted this video. She was surfing, I guess, and she saw some jet exhaust in those trails that we've all seen above the beach. And here's what she had to say about it.
I was taking the weekend off the internet. I've been surfing this morning. and was watching the planes flying overhead, and then I couldn't take it anymore. But that is not a contrail. That looked like it started as a contrail maybe, and now it's turning into a cloud. See how thick that is? You can see this one, it's a little further behind. This one's a little bit further behind as well. This one is the one that's been up there longest. This shit has to end. This is ridiculous. It's like an otherwise perfect day.
She's referring to this idea that somehow jets funded by the United States government or maybe some private entities, but jets have been spreading these trails that have chemicals in them that are aimed at changing something, changing the climate or doing something. That's what geoengineering is, trying to alter weather patterns, and that they have a harmful effect on humans in some way or on the environment in some way that's also damaging to human. Now, this is one of the alleged causes of human health problems that I've been more skeptical of. There's a lot of them that Shanahan and Kennedy have talked about that I'm a little more willing to entertain, like the vaccine schedule for children and the number of vaccines that they get, electromagnetic radiation, maybe, pesticides for sure. I'm a little skeptical of those. Processed foods, yeah, that's bad for people. Food additives, yeah, that could be bad for people. SSRIs and psychiatric medications in general. Yes, I was a mental health counselor. My wife has had a long career as a psychiatric nurse, and we have seen some of the effects of SSRIs, that is serotonin reuptake inhibitors, selective serotonin uptake re-inhibitors, whatever it is. But we have seen the side effects of that doctors don't always talk about, such as dyskinesias, which means involuntary limb movements. I think these prescriptions are overprescribed and can, have long-term health effects, perhaps. So I'm skeptical about a lot of things that they're skeptical of, but this is one I haven't looked into much. I know that jets, they have water vapor coming out of them, and they look like cloud trails. I'm not sure that they could hide for as long as this has been alleged to be going on. They could have hid it that long. Of course, government does have secrets, but why would they be keeping it secret if they were trying to do these things? I don't know. I just have a lot of questions about this. And she did post trying to defend herself because people sometimes mock these theories, and I don't want to mock them. I'm not that well informed about it, but I'm a little skeptical about it. I want to be convinced. In other words, you always have to either be like, okay, I'm leaning for or against that theory, so persuade me. What is your default position until you get more evidence? Mine is skepticism towards this one. Anyway, she posted some things. Here it is. This is her post that came after that. I think this came on Monday. She's first of all saying she doesn't like the word chemtrails because it's tagged as a conspiracy theory. Well, it is the theory that there's a conspiracy behind what's going on in that. But she calls it geoengineering, which means has to do with weather modification, atmospheric manipulation, etc. And then she has a link to a published paper in 2018 called California Wildfires, Role of Undisclosed Atmospheric Manipulation and Geoengineering. Well, I clicked on that link to see what was there. There's the webpage that it's on. You see there, it's in the Journal of Geography, Environment, and Earth Science International from 2018 by J. Marvin Herndon, who doesn't seem to have academic credentials behind his name, and Mark Whiteside from the Florida Department of Health. They're the ones who wrote this. And my question was, is this a peer-reviewed article in a well-known journal in the field? I am not a scientist. I don't know much about these areas. So I did not read the article. I don't think I would be competent to evaluate it. Let me bring this back to my face since I'm commenting again. I have a PhD, but it's in social sciences, it's in political science. But I know a little bit about the academic process and how papers are reviewed and how journals are weighted in terms of their credibility and usefulness to the field. And I also have idea that you need a lot of background knowledge to really assess a paper properly. You can't just look at it and say, is this reasonable? Is it clearly written? Are there statistics done properly? You also have to have some background knowledge to know what they might be leaving out, studies they may have neglected that can counter their thesis, ways that they may have set up the problem that are already been well researched and contrary things that have been established. You got to have a lot of knowledge in your field to be able to assess things credibly. Now, Nicole Shanahan, she has a law degree, graduate school law degree, so she is not somebody who could assess this either. So what I did is I got on the web and I started to look around to see if there has anybody else has assessed this. And I found an interesting exchange on Reddit that didn't have to do with this journal in particular, but something similar. And let me pull that up for you to show you. This was a question that appeared on a Reddit thread a year ago, and it says, help, please. Is this journal company a scam? And the journal sounds similar to the one I looked at, Journal of Earth and Environmental Sciences, but the one that we were looking at was different. It was the Journal of Geography, Earth, and I think Environmental International, something like that. So it was a longer title. He says he's new to publishing. He's got a master's degree, and he was interested in publishing something. But he's been getting these emails inviting him to submit manuscripts to this journal. And he wanted to know if this is a scam. And there was a very good answer to his question by another person. And here's what they had to say. They say, if you're not an experienced academic, be cautious publishing yourself. Best way to choose a journal is to look at where high quality papers are being published, yada, yada, good advice. And then he has a bullet points of questions to ask. And I thought these are all good questions. This is well framed. The first one, have I ever heard of the journal before? Well, I'm not in the field, so I'm not able to assess. I wouldn't know if it's a familiar field in that or not. Does the website look amateurish? I wouldn't say particularly, it looked kind of basic, but this is an interesting one. Is the journal published by an organization I've never heard of? Well, on their website for that journal, I could not see any reference to any organization, so it looks like it's just a standalone journal. Is the scope excessively broad? Yeah, well, just look at the title of Geography, Earth and Environmental Science International. That's pretty broad. Is the journal indexed in the Web of Science? I looked up the Web of Science, and no, it is not listed in that. Does the journal make a big deal about the fact that it is open access? Yes, it does make that claim. And is the editorial board affiliated with reputable universities? Well, none that I could find. I looked at the whole editorial board, and many of them are in places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, not exactly hotbeds of academic prominence. And I didn't recognize the names of any of the universities, and they're not all from universities. Many of them are from like governmental departments. So that gives me a clue. And at the end, he sums it up. All of the above is not necessarily to say that this journal is definitely predatory, but it's pretty damn likely. So what do we get out of that? What I'm saying is that this journal does not look like a very good source for her claims of geoengineering. And I don't want to make fun of people that believe in this. I don't know the arguments pro and con, but often this happens that people who are not that familiar with academia think one journal is good as another. Any article that looks like it's been researched is something you can rely on, and that's not necessarily true. It's also true that just because something is published in a reputable, peer-reviewed journal, that it may not be right. They may make mistakes, they may be wrong. But the thing is, they got other people who know the field really well and are known in their own areas, their own specialties, looking at the paper to decide, is this well done? Is this a quality paper? So it's more likely to be something you can trust in. Not to say that it's necessarily correct, but if you're going to make a decision as a layman, that is an indication of whether or not you should trust a particular journal. So in this case, I remain skeptical of geoengineering, and I think Nicole is a little too quick to give credibility to things that she shouldn't. at least in this case, and I'm not blaming her, I'm just saying this is common among people that are not what academics, that they don't know these things as well as those of us who have had the unfortunate experience of working in academia have had. All right, so the other thing that she talked about was a baptism that she had about a month ago, the day before the inauguration of Donald Trump, actually. My baptism story, and this is quite a long post by Nicole Shanahan. She posted this on Tuesday, and she starts out by talking about how one evening in January, a few days before the inauguration, she was trying to comfort her daughter who had some kind of night terrors. And after the daughter fell asleep, Nicole felt this presence that was kind of, what did she say, suffocating, bad energy. And so she goes down to say she had this person working for her, a healthcare practitioner, I think, who was also Christian, praying for her, which she didn't know at the time, but she found out. And she asked this person, because she noticed that he had been praying for her, he asked her if she knew anyone that could help her deal with bad energy. Basically, she says, quote, an exorcism, end quote. And he said, yes, he knew this minister. So she talked to this person, and then she decided she wanted to get baptized, and her partner also had been considering converting to Christianity. I guess she had converted to Judaism a while back, maybe about 20 years ago, for one of her spouses or one of her partners at the time. So they were both considering converting from Jews to being Jews for Jesus, as they're sometimes called, even though her background really is a Roman Catholic. That's how she was raised as a child. And here's kind of some of the passages that people may find rather strange, secular people. Of course, there's a lot of Christians who won't find that strange at all. But she, first of all, talks about her father who had an alcohol problem. And I've highlighted here some passages. I was taught that my father was a quote unquote sick person, but I never seriously considered whether demons were real until recently. Honestly, my last year in politics changed that. Learning just how far some will go to inflict atrocities on innocent Americans has shocked me awake. Other unexplainable events have also forced me to reconsider whether we are waging a war not merely with flesh and blood, but with spiritual forces. And then she goes down another paragraph and says, the battle of good versus evil isn't just theoretical, it's real and all around us. Now, these comments may give some people pause about her. I'm going to say it. This is not my thinking, but about her, her mental state, let's say, because this is not among secular minded people, this is kind of far off on the fridge. And we all know some Christians who may believe this stuff, but it's not mainstream Christianity. What is that these days? There's so many forms of Christianity that one of the problems I had as a Christian was determining, okay, if this is God's truth coming to us, how do we know which version of the truth it is? So I'm not mocking anybody's beliefs on this, and it may be well true. I have even had some experience where I questioned whether evil was some kind of a was not just the acts of people, but it had some kind of force that could influence people from outside or from inside or something like that. So I don't know. The world's a mysterious place, and there's a lot of things that we don't know about. I have had experiences that other people would say were pretty bizarre, and maybe they would question my mental state and at the time that I was experiencing them as well. And they didn't all have to do with hallucinogenic drugs, in case you may be thinking that given my age, and some of you know something of my background, I think. But what I wanted to say about this, here's my assessment. She is a woman who is very typical of many people in the country today. And this is typical of societies in which there is a general sense of breakdown of consensus about what is real and what is not, and social institutions seem to be unreliable and crumbling. Now, this may be even more disconcerting for people whose life experience has been that it's hard to trust other people, because her father was not a trustworthy figure in her life. as an alcoholic. You know, you couldn't count on him to be there or to be in a state of mind to be helpful to the family. And you never know what's going to happen with somebody who's an alcoholic. So you always, as a child, feel on edge, or not even as a child. If you're living with an alcoholic, it can be chaotic. So probably that was an experience for her, having to do with trust in people in power. And then she's been through other traumatic experiences as well. So she may be particularly susceptible to this sense that things are falling apart around this, and we don't know who or what to trust. Lots and lots of people are feeling that. And I would say this is similar to Germany before the Nazis took power, because there was a lot of interest in different types of spirituality and alternative spiritualities and mysticism and various kind of cult things. I'm not equating wide Christian beliefs with cults, but we have New Age cults going on for a long time here, since the 1970s. And it's true in Tsarist Russia before they overthrew the Tsar, and in a revolution that eventually led to the Bolshevik takeover and the socialist republic there. So it's characteristic of societies that are on the verge of breakdown, and people feel that they can't trust social institutions. They feel like beliefs are all over the map. They don't know what to believe and what not to believe because there's not a general consensus. Now, when I grew up, it seemed to me like there was that. In the 1950s, as a child, it seemed like everyone I knew pretty much was a Christian, went to church. Most of them early on was Roman Catholic in my neighborhood, but then you got to meet other people. They went to Protestant churches. Didn't really know much about anything else, Buddhism or Jews or Hinduism, anything like that, Islam even, Muslims. The only thing I knew about that was what I read in our history book in Catholic school, that there were the Crusades and big wars between Christians and Muslims, and fights over land and that kind of stuff. Different areas of the world that they conquered and that Christians from Europe tried to reconquer. I knew some of that, but not a lot. So I had the sense that, adults were pretty much on the same page, that people trusted government institutions, people trusted their churches, they trusted the TV news, they trusted newspapers, they trusted the police. They all were opposed to communism and in favor of strong military. So these things just seem to be widespread and taken for granted. And it gave you a sense of, okay, this is what we believe. This is who we are, rather than, a lot of chaos about, well, everybody thinks something different. Where do I fit in? What's true? What's not? Of course, it wasn't true in the 1950s. Even then, there were plenty of people who had different points of view. It was just they were suppressed. You didn't have a lot of opportunities for people from other religions to get to high political positions. Even Roman Catholics at that time was pretty much white Protestants, the WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So a lot of people were kept out of the public eye. And on TV, you didn't hear anything about different religions. It was kind of all sanitized from that kind of stuff. And there were communists in this country, and there were Nazis in this country. They had different points of view, obviously. And, there was a lot of diversity of opinion and views. It's just that there was a widespread blanketing of us in this mythology of Americans. This is what we believe. Anyway, getting off my subject, I'm saying when that starts to break down, people start to try to look for something they can really hang on to and believe in. And Christianity is very appealing for that matter, as is any kind of religion, especially in its more fundamentalist versions. By fundamentalism, I mean you hold on to certain things as absolutely true because it came straight from God down through maybe a prophet, or maybe, in Jesus' case, that he was supposed to be an incarnation of God. Not an incarnation, the incarnation of God in that religion. So there's a sense you're looking for something that you can hold on to and believe in. And I think this is what she's gone through and what lots and lots of people have gone through. Now, I've been meaning to talk more about religion and spirituality because Christian nationalism is a big force within the Trump MAGA movement. And of course, evangelical Christians have been a big force in the Republicans Party for a while now, several decades. I've seen this grow. I have been a Christian in the past. Currently, I would call myself more of a follower of Jesus with a Buddhist mindset, something like that. But I've been thinking about talking about this more, but I'm also considering maybe this should be a whole different channel where I talk about more spiritual, religious type topics. Let me know what you think about that. Should I, bring things up on this show when these issues come up in politics? This is political dharma, after all. I'm bumping into my microphone. The dharma part is a spiritual term. Or should I put on another channel and just go delve into that stuff more deeply there? I don't know. That's my news for this week. Not all the news. I have some things about alternative parties and how they did in the last election cycle that I'll be doing sometime, I hope this weekend. But my wife's sister is visiting us for the weekend, so lots going on here, and it's not always hard for me to get away to prepare these podcasts and put them on the air. So thanks for watching, and that's it for now, and talk to you again soon.